Be sure to like, comment, and subscribe for more amazing HFY stories. Hit the bell icon to get notified about our latest uploads. Captain Aaron Hale stood at the edge of the observation deck, gazing out at the iridescent planet below. Zinther Prime shimmered with an almost unnatural beauty, its swirling turquoise oceans dotted with luminescent landmasses. The alien world had captivated Earth's scientific community, but Aaron was here for a far more delicate mission: diplomacy. The hiss of the airlock signaled the arrival of their guests. Aaron turned, adjusting the collar of his uniform. Beside him stood his first officer, Commander Elena Ruiz, her expression a mix of wariness and curiosity. "They're here," she murmured, her hand resting lightly on her holstered sidearm. The Zinther delegation entered with fluid grace, their crystalline forms refracting the light into rainbows. Aaron's gaze was drawn to the figure at the center. Unlike the others, her features seemed softer, her movements less mechanical. She met his eyes with an intensity that sent a shiver down his spine. "Captain Hale," she said, her voice resonating like a melody. "I am Valithia, emissary of the Zinther. And to you I pledge my heart." The room fell silent. Aaron blinked, caught off guard. "I beg your pardon?" Valithia stepped closer, her violet eyes glowing faintly. "You saved my life, human. By the customs of my people, my heart belongs to you now. I will do anything you ask for as long as I live." Behind him, Elena muttered, "Well, that escalated quickly." Aaron raised a hand, silencing her. "Valithia, I think there's been a misunderstanding. I don't recall." "You may not recall, but it was your actions that spared me," Valithia interrupted. "The ripple of your choices reached me across the void, pulling me from the brink of death. It is not for you to decide the validity of my bond. It is for me to honor it." Aaron glanced at the other Zinther delegates, whose expressions were unreadable. "This isn't exactly standard protocol for an alliance negotiation." Valithia tilted her head, her crystalline skin catching the light. "This is no negotiation, Captain. It is a vow." Before he could respond, a low hum filled the room. One of the Zinther stepped forward, their voice harsh and metallic. "Valithia's pledge is unorthodox. It risks dishonoring our traditions. We question the wisdom of this choice." Valithia's eyes narrowed. "My choice is my own. It does not require your approval." The tension in the room was palpable. Aaron cleared his throat, stepping forward. "If this is going to be an issue, perhaps we should reconvene after." A sudden tremor shook the deck. Alarms blared as the ship's AI announced, "Unidentified vessels approaching. Defensive measures engaged." Aaron turned to Elena. "Status report. Multiple hostiles, Captain." "They're jamming communications," she replied, her voice tight. Valithia moved with startling speed, placing herself between Aaron and the door. Her crystalline body began to glow, intricate patterns forming across her skin. "It seems your enemies are mine as well. I will protect you, Captain. This I swear." Aaron didn't have time to argue as the first explosion rocked the ship. The corridors of the Erebus were alive with chaos. Red emergency lights flickered, and the faint scent of ozone lingered as the ship's shields absorbed the impacts of hostile fire. Captain Aaron Hale moved briskly toward the bridge, his boots echoing against the metallic floor. Beside him, Valithia strode silently, her crystalline form shimmering with an otherworldly glow. "Status report." Aaron barked as he entered the bridge. Elena turned from her console, her face pale but determined. "We're being engaged by 3 unknown vessels, Zinther in design but unmarked. Shields are holding at 62%. They're using jammers to block long-range comms." Aaron's jaw tightened. "Return fire. Target their engines, disable not destroy." Valithia stepped forward, her presence commanding even amidst the turmoil. "These ships are rogue elements, not sanctioned by the Zinther Council. Their motives are unknown, but I suspect they aim to sabotage our meeting." Aaron glanced at her, skeptical. "You seem certain of that?" "Rogue factions thrive in the shadows of distrust," Valithia replied, her tone calm despite the escalating situation. "This alliance threatens their existence. They will do whatever it takes to see it fail." Before Aaron could respond, a sharp explosion rocked the bridge, sending sparks raining down from an overloaded console. "Shields at 40%. Elena shouted. "They're focusing fire on our propulsion systems. If they disable us, we're sitting ducks." Aaron gritted his teeth, his mind racing. "Valithia, if you have any suggestions, now's the time." Valithia stepped closer to the central hollow table, her glowing fingers tracing the schematic of the attacking ships. "Their vessels rely on crystalline core systems. A targeted electromagnetic pulse could temporarily disrupt their weapons and propulsion. Your ship's technology is capable of this, is it not? Elena frowned. It's possible, but we'd have to drop shields briefly to charge the EMP. That's risky. Aaron hesitated, weighing their options. What's the likelihood of success? High, Valithia replied without hesitation. But only if the pulse is delivered precisely. I will guide your weapons officer. Aaron nodded. Do it. Elena prepped the EMP tactical, follow Valithia's lead. Valithia moved to the tactical console, her crystalline hands manipulating the controls with fluid precision. Adjust the frequency to 1.47 terahertz. Target their central spires. That is where their cores are housed. The ship trembled again as another barrage struck its hull. Elena's voice was tense. EMP ready in 15 seconds. Shields dropping now. Aaron's stomach nodded as the shields powered down. The hostile ships immediately capitalized, their weapons slamming into the Erebus. Come on, he muttered under his breath. EMP ready? Elena called. Fire. Aaron commanded. The Erebus unleashed a pulse of energy, a wave of blue light rippling outward. The attacking ships shuddered, their weapons falling silent as their propulsion systems flickered and died. Tactical systems are offline on all 3 ships. Elena reported, her voice triumphant. Aaron allowed himself a brief sigh of relief. Bring the shields back up and position us to intercept any reinforcements. Valithia, you just bought us some breathing room? Valithia inclined her head, her glowing form dimming slightly. It was necessary. As the bridge crew worked to stabilize the ship, Aaron turned to Valithia. You seem to know a lot about their tactics. Care to explain? Valithia hesitated, her gaze dropping momentarily. The rogue factions are known to me. Before I became an emissary, I was part of a task force assigned to monitor their activities. My knowledge is first-hand. Aaron studied her, his instincts telling him there was more to the story. And you didn't think to mention this earlier? I did not anticipate their involvement, Valithia replied, her voice tinged with regret. But now it is clear. They view our alliance as a threat to their autonomy. Aaron sighed. Great. So not only are we dealing with a divided species, but they've also got enough firepower to take on a human vessel. Valithia's violet eyes met his. Their power lies in subterfuge and fear. Together we can dismantle their influence. Elena interrupted, her tone grim. Captain, we've got a problem. Long-range sensors are picking up additional contacts. Reinforcements, likely from the same rogue faction. Aaron's frustration mounted. How much time do we have? 20 minutes, tops. Aaron turned to Valithia. Any more tricks up your sleeve? Valithia's expression hardened. The rogue faction operates from a hidden base on the dark side of this planet. If we strike there, we can neutralize their command structure and force their ships to stand down. Aaron's brow furrowed. How do you know where their base is? Valithia hesitated. Because I helped design it. The bridge fell silent, the weight of her words hanging heavy. Aaron crossed his arms. You've got a lot of explaining to do, Valithia. She met his gaze unflinchingly. I was once aligned with them, Captain. But I saw the destruction they wrought and chose a different path. That path led me to this moment, to you. Elena folded her arms. So, we're supposed to trust you now? After you just admitted you worked with the enemy? Valithia's crystalline form flared briefly, her voice resolute. I swore my heart to Captain Hale. That bond is unbreakable. My allegiance is to him and this mission. Aaron exhaled slowly, his instincts telling him to believe her despite the risk. We don't have time for second-guessing. Valithia, you're going to guide us to that base. But if this is a trap... It is not, Valithia interrupted. I will stake my life on it. Aaron nodded. Elena, prepare the ship for a tactical strike. We're taking the fight to them. The crew scrambled into action, the tension palpable. As Valithia returned to the tactical station, Aaron approached her. Valithia, he said quietly. I need to know something. Why are you doing this? Why bind yourself to me? Valithia's violet eyes softened. Because your actions, however unintentional, saved me from despair. You gave me a reason to believe in a better future. That is a debt I cannot repay, but I will try. Aaron nodded, her words striking a chord he hadn't expected. Let's make sure we survive long enough to see that future. The Erebus powered up its engines, turning toward the dark side of Zinther Prime. The battle was far from over, but for the first time, Aaron felt a glimmer of hope. The Erebus cut through the darkened atmosphere of Zinther Prime like a blade. The starless expanse of the planet's shadowed side stretched before them, a patchwork of jagged mountain ranges and faintly glowing crystalline formations. Somewhere beneath that desolate terrain lay the rogue faction's stronghold, hidden, fortified, and deadly. Captain Aaron Hale stood at the bridge's hollow table, studying the schematics Valithia had hastily reconstructed from memory. Her crystalline fingers danced across the interface, highlighting potential entry points and defensive emplacements. This base wasn't designed for a full-scale assault, Valithia said, her tone calm but urgent. Its strength lies in its secrecy. If we strike fast and disable their command node, we can force the rogue faction's ships to retreat. Elena Ruiz frowned, leaning over the console. You're awfully familiar with their setup for someone who's supposedly left their side. Valithia didn't flinch. I helped construct it years ago. Back then I believed in their cause. That belief no longer holds. Aaron raised a hand to forestall further argument. We don't have time for debates. Valithia, will they have defenses capable of detecting us before we're in range? Yes, she admitted, pointing to a series of glowing markers on the hologram. Long-range scanners and automated turrets will intercept any ship-sized object. However, there's a blind spot here. She tapped the edge of the hologram, where a series of jagged peaks obscured a narrow ravine. If we approach low and fast, we can evade detection and deploy a ground team. Aaron nodded, his mind already planning the operation. Elena, prep a strike team. We'll need our best for this. Elena hesitated. Captain, are you sure about this? We're putting a lot of trust in her. Aaron met her gaze. We don't have a choice. Either we end this now or we let them regroup and crush us later. I'll lead the team myself. Valithia stepped forward. I will accompany you. My knowledge of the base will be invaluable. Aaron glanced at her, reading the determination in her violet eyes. All right, but you follow my orders. Understood? Valithia inclined her head. As you command. The strike team assembled in the Erebus's deployment bay, each member clad in sleek combat suits designed for versatility in hostile environments. Aaron checked his weapon, a compact plasma rifle, before addressing the team. We're heading into unknown territory, but we've got the advantage of surprise. Our mission is to disable the rogue faction's command node and force their ships to retreat. Stay sharp, stay focused, and trust your team. Valithia stood silently beside him, her crystalline form dim to avoid reflecting light. As the shuttle descended into the ravine, she leaned closer. Captain, if we encounter resistance, I can assist in neutralizing threats. My abilities extend beyond what you've seen. Aaron raised an eyebrow. We'll cross that bridge when we come to it. For now, stick to the plan. The shuttle touched down smoothly in the shadow of a towering crystalline spire. The team disembarked quickly, their boots crunching against the coarse terrain. Valithia, lead the way, Aaron said, his rifle at the ready. She moved with fluid precision, guiding them through narrow paths and under craggy overhangs. The air was thick with an unearthly hum, the sound of the planet's natural energy coursing through its crystalline formations. They reached the outer perimeter of the base, a series of angular structures carved into the mountainside. Valithia gestured for them to halt. Automated turrets here, she whispered. Give me a moment. She stepped forward, her hands glowing faintly as she interfaced with a concealed console. The turrets powered down, their ominous red lights fading to black. Elena exchanged a glance with Aaron. Impressive. Let's hope this isn't an elaborate trap. It is not, Valithia replied without looking up. I would sooner die than betray the trust one have pledged. Aaron motioned for the team to move forward. Let's keep moving. Inside the base, the air was cold and sterile. The corridors were dimly lit, their walls lined with crystalline conduits pulsating with faint light. Valithia led them unerringly, bypassing patrol routes and deactivating security measures with uncanny efficiency. As they approached the command node, Aaron signaled for the team to halt. 2 guards up ahead, he murmured, peering around the corner. Elena, take the left. Valithia, can you handle the right? Valithia nodded, her hands glowing faintly. Consider it done. The team moved into position. On Aaron's signal, Elena fired a precision shot, her plasma bolt striking the first guard. Simultaneously, Valithia stepped into view, her crystalline arm morphing into a sharp blade. With a single swift motion, she incapacitated the second guard. Aaron stared for a moment before motioning them forward. Remind me not to get on your bad side. Valithia allowed herself a faint smile. I would never harm you, Captain. They reached the command node, a circular chamber dominated by a towering crystalline structure. Valithia moved to the control console, her hands moving with practiced ease. I can disable their fleet's coordination systems from here, she said. But it will take time. Aaron nodded. Do it. We'll cover you. The team took defensive positions as Valithia worked. The hum of the bass grew louder, an ominous vibration that set Aaron's teeth on edge. Captain, we've got incoming. Elena shouted, her rifle trained on the corridor. A squad of rogue soldiers stormed into view, their crystalline armor glinting in the dim light. The chamber erupted in chaos as plasma bolts filled the air. Aaron fired in controlled bursts, taking down one enemy after another. Beside him, Valithya's crystalline form shimmered with a radiant glow. She moved with fluid grace, her arms morphing into blades and shields as she engaged the attackers. Despite their efforts, the enemy pressed harder. One rogue soldier lunged toward Valithya, a blade raised high. Aaron acted instinctively, stepping in front of her and firing point blank. The soldier fell, but not before landing a glancing blow. Pain lanced through Aaron's side as he stumbled backward. Captain? Valithya cried, catching him as he fell. Her violet eyes flared with alarm. I'm fine, Aaron grunted, pressing a hand to the wound. Just finished the job. Valithya hesitated for only a moment before returning to the console. With a final surge of energy, the command node flickered and died. It is done, she said, turning back to him. The rogue fleet will falter without centralized coordination. Aaron nodded, his vision blurring slightly. Good work. Let's get out of here. As the team retreated to the shuttle, Aaron leaned heavily on Elena for support. Valithya stayed close, her expression unreadable. You didn't have to take that hit, she said quietly as they boarded. Aaron managed a faint smile. You've got my back. I've got yours. That's how this works. Valithya's gaze softened, and for a moment the tension between them melted away. As the shuttle lifted off, Aaron stared out at the base receding into the distance. The mission had been a success, but he couldn't shake the feeling that this was only the beginning. The rogue faction might be weakened, but their fight was far from over. And Valithya, she was an enigma he was only beginning to understand. The Erebus drifted through orbit above Zinther Prime's dark side, its hull still scorched from the earlier skirmish. In the dim light of his quarters, Captain Aaron Hale sat at the edge of his bunk, wrapping a fresh bandage around the wound in his side. His reflection stared back at him from a small mirror, his expression weary but resolute. A soft knock at the door pulled him from his thoughts. Come in, he called. The door slid open with a gentle hiss, revealing Valithya. Her crystalline form shimmered faintly, the violet light of her core casting soft shadows across the room. She hesitated in the doorway, her hands clasped before her. I came to check on you, she said, her voice quiet. Aaron raised an eyebrow. I'm fine. Just a scratch. Valithya stepped inside, the door sliding shut behind her. You took a blade meant for me. That is not just a scratch. Aaron shrugged, wincing slightly as the motion tugged at his wound. It's what we do, Valithya. We protect each other. She moved closer, her glowing eyes fixed on him. You shouldn't have had to. Aaron set the bandage down and leaned back against the wall. What's really on your mind? Valithya hesitated, her crystalline form dimming. The rogue faction won't stop. They've lost their coordination, but their ideology is deeply rooted. I fear this is only the beginning of their retaliation. Aaron studied her for a moment. And where do you fit into all this? You said you used to believe in their cause. What changed? Valithya's gaze dropped, her voice tinged with regret. The rogue faction was born from desperation. When our world faced ecological collapse, they sought to preserve what little we had left, at any cost. I aligned with them out of duty, but their methods became monstrous. She paused, the light in her core dimming further. I left when I could no longer bear the atrocities they committed. But leaving didn't absolve me. I carry their sins as my own. Aaron leaned forward, his tone firm but understanding. You're not responsible for their actions. You made a choice to walk away to do something better. That's what matters now. Valithya looked up, her violet eyes searching his. Do you truly believe that? I do, Aaron said without hesitation. For a moment, silence hung between them. Then Valithya straightened, her core glowing brighter. Thank you, Captain. Your faith gives me strength. Aaron nodded. We'll get through this. Together. The calm was short-lived. Hours later, the Erebus's alarm systems blared through the ship, jolting Aaron from a fitful sleep. Bridge, report. He barked into his comm as he hurried down the corridor, ignoring the protest of his injury. Elena's voice crackled through the line. Captain, we've got a problem. Rogue forces are regrouping, and they've launched a coordinated strike on our allied outposts. We're getting distress calls from multiple locations. Aaron quickened his pace, his jaw tightening. Prepare the ship for emergency response. I'm on my way. By the time he reached the bridge, the crew was already in high gear. Tactical displays showed a flurry of activity. Xinther rogue ships attacking human settlements and neutral territories alike. Elena looked up from her console, her expression grim. It's not just an isolated attack. They're targeting key supply lines and civilian hubs. It's a full-scale offensive. Aaron turned to Valithia, who had entered behind him. Do they have the numbers to sustain this? Valithia studied the display, her brow furrowing. No. This is a desperate move. They're overextending themselves, hoping to fracture the alliance before it solidifies. Aaron's mind raced. Desperation makes them dangerous. If we split our forces to respond to every attack, they'll pick us apart. We need to cut off the head of the snake. Valithia's gaze sharpened. Their leadership resides in a hidden council. It's not tied to a single location but moves frequently. I know of only one place where they might regroup after losing their command node. Aaron crossed his arms. Where? Valithia hesitated, then pointed to a distant, barren region on the star map. The Wastes of Thrain. It's an inhospitable zone, but it provides perfect cover for clandestine operations. If their leadership is there, dismantling it will cripple their efforts. Elena frowned. That's a hell of a gamble, Captain. Aaron glanced at her. We don't have a better option. If we take out their leaders, the rest will fall apart. He turned to the crew. Set a course for the Wastes of Thrain. Prepare for high-risk engagement. This ends now. The Erebus emerged from hyperspace above Thrain, its sensors scanning the desolate expanse below. The planet's surface was a lifeless wasteland of ash and jagged rock, its atmosphere thick with ion storms. Reading faint energy signatures, Elena reported. Could be their base or another trap. Aaron's expression hardened. Valithia, does this match what you know? She nodded. The Rogue Council operates in secrecy, but this is consistent with their tactics. If they are here, they will be well protected. Aaron's gaze swept the bridge. Prepare for a ground assault. I want strike teams ready to deploy in 10 minutes. Valithia stepped forward. I will accompany you again. My knowledge of their structures will be critical. Aaron hesitated, his instincts torn. This is going to be more dangerous than before. I understand, Valithia said firmly. But I will not abandon you. Aaron met her gaze, reading the resolve in her eyes. All right. Let's end this. The team descended to the surface in a smaller, more agile dropship. The turbulence was brutal as ion storms buffeted the craft, but the pilot held steady, bringing them to a rough landing near the suspected base. Valithia led them through the jagged terrain, her crystalline form glowing faintly in the oppressive darkness. The team moved in silence, their weapons ready, their nerves taut. They reached the entrance to an underground bunker, its heavy doors marked with alien glyphs. Valithia approached, her hands glowing as she activated the hidden controls. The doors groaned open, revealing a dimly lit corridor leading into the depths. Aaron motioned for the team to move forward. Stay sharp, he said. This place is a fortress. As they advanced, the air grew colder, the walls lined with conduits pulsing with an eerie red light. Valithia guided them unerringly, her movements swift and purposeful. Suddenly, the corridor ahead erupted in gunfire. The team scattered, taking cover as rogue soldiers poured into view. Aaron returned fire, his plasma bolts cutting through the enemy ranks. Valithia moved beside him, her crystalline arms morphing into a blade and shield. She fought with a precision that was almost unnerving, her strikes efficient and deadly. Despite the overwhelming odds, the team pressed forward, their determination unwavering. Finally, they reached the central chamber, a vast room dominated by a crystalline throne where the rogue faction's leader sat, his form towering and imposing. Aaron stepped forward, his rifle trained on the figure. It's over. Surrender or we'll end this the hard way. The leader laughed, his voice cold and resonant. You've come far, human. But you underestimate our resolve. We fight not for power but for survival. You cannot extinguish what burns in the hearts of the desperate. Valithia stepped beside Aaron, her voice firm. You fight for destruction, not survival. Your time is over. The leader's gaze turned to her, his expression darkening. Traitor. You chose them over your own kind. I chose hope, Valithia replied. The room erupted into chaos as the leader activated a hidden device, the walls pulsing with dangerous energy. Aaron and Valithia exchanged a quick glance, the unspoken understanding clear. This was their final stand. The rogue leader rose from his crystalline throne, his towering form shimmering with volatile energy. The entire chamber pulsed with an ominous rhythm as the conduits along the walls began to glow brighter. Aaron could feel the shift in the air, a storm of power building toward an explosive crescendo. "You think you can end this rebellion so easily?" the rogue leader sneered, his voice resonating with fury. "You've only sealed your doom." Aaron tightened his grip on his rifle, his gaze flicking to Valithia. "What's he doing?" Valithia's face was grim, her crystalline features casting fractured shadows across the chamber. "The conduits are channeling the planet's energy. If he overloads the system, it could annihilate this entire region, and us with it." Aaron's jaw clenched. "We can't let that happen." The rogue leader extended his arms, a network of glowing veins spreading across his crystalline body. "You've left me no choice but to wield the fury of Zinther itself." "Fanatic," Valithia spat, stepping forward. "You're willing to destroy everything we fought for? This isn't survival, it's madness." The leader's gaze locked on her, his expression filled with disdain. "And you, Valithia? You chose to betray your people, your heritage. You are no better than these humans who would see us extinguished." Aaron took a step forward, his rifle aimed squarely at the leader's core. "Your fight isn't with humanity. You made it a fight against reason and decency. Stand down before you doom everyone here." The leader's response was a guttural laugh that reverberated through the chamber. "You dare lecture me, human? Let's see if you can stand against the power of a dying world." With a motion like a thunderclap, the leader unleashed a wave of energy that rippled through the chamber. The strike was blinding, sending Aaron and the others sprawling. The walls shook violently, crystalline shards raining down from above. Aaron pushed himself to his feet, his vision swimming. "Everyone okay?" Elena's voice crackled through the comm. "We're fine, but he's powering up something big. We need to move now." Valithia stood, her glow intensifying as she stepped closer to Aaron. "He's drawing from the central crystal matrix. If we sever his connection to it, we can stop him." Aaron nodded, his mind racing. "How do we do that?" "There are energy conduits feeding the matrix from 3 points around the room," Valithia said, gesturing to glowing nodes embedded in the walls. "If we destroy them, we can disrupt the flow." "Then let's make it happen," Aaron said. Elena split the team. "Take one node. Valithia and I will handle the others." The room descended into chaos as the team fanned out, dodging incoming energy blasts from the rogue leader. Each pulse of his power sent shockwaves through the chamber, forcing the team to take cover behind shattered crystalline debris. Elena led her squad toward the first node, ducking and weaving as bolts of crackling energy seared past. She raised her rifle, firing a series of precise shots that struck the glowing conduit. Sparks erupted and the node's light dimmed. "First node down," she called out. Aaron and Valithia moved together toward the second node. The rogue leader's attention shifted to them, his eyes blazing with hatred. With a roar, he hurled a concentrated beam of energy in their direction. "Move!" Aaron shouted, grabbing Valithia's arm and diving behind a jagged crystal outcropping. The beam struck the ground where they had stood, leaving a smoking crater. Valithia's eyes flared as she turned to Aaron. "Keep him occupied. I'll handle the node." Aaron nodded, stepping out of cover to draw the leader's fire. "Hey, over here!" he yelled, unloading a volley of plasma bolts. The rogue leader roared in frustration, focusing his attacks on Aaron. Meanwhile, Valithia sprinted to the node, her crystalline hands glowing as she manipulated the control mechanisms. With a precise strike from her morphing arm, she severed the conduit, causing it to flicker and die. "Second node down," Valithia shouted. Elena's voice came through the comm again. "We're pinned down. This last node's protected by automated turrets." Aaron turned to Valithia. "Can you disable them remotely?" She shook her head. "Not without direct access. We'll have to take them out manually." Aaron nodded, his determination unwavering. "Then let's go." The two of them raced across the chamber, dodging the rogue leader's relentless attacks and the hail of turret fire. The final node loomed ahead, its glowing core shielded by a cluster of automated defenses. "Cover me," Valithia said, her voice steady despite the chaos. Aaron positioned himself behind a fragment of debris, firing at the turrets to draw their attention. Valithia moved with precision, her form glowing brightly as she dodged and weaved through the incoming fire. Her arm morphed into a blade, slicing through the turrets one by one. With the defenses neutralized, she approached the final node. Her hands glowed brighter than ever as she worked quickly, bypassing the energy flow and severing the conduit with a decisive strike. The node's light flickered and died, and the entire chamber shuddered. "It's done?" Valithia called out. The rogue leader let out an agonized scream as the flow of energy to his core was cut off. The glowing veins across his body dimmed, and his form began to crack and splinter. "No," he bellowed, his voice echoing through the collapsing chamber. "You cannot stop us. You cannot stop me." Aaron stepped forward, his rifle aimed steadily. "You stopped yourself. This could have ended differently." The rogue leader snarled, his body crumbling. With one final, defiant roar, he exploded in a burst of light, leaving only silence in his wake. The chamber trembled violently as the unstable energy in the conduits began to spiral out of control. "This place is going to blow," Elena shouted. "We need to get out of here." Aaron turned to Valithia. "Can you stabilize it?" Valithia shook her head. "The matrix is collapsing. There's no saving it." Aaron activated his comm. "All teams retreat to the dropship. Move." The team raced through the crumbling corridors, the walls shaking and collapsing around them. Aaron stayed close to Valithia, his rifle ready as they fought their way past rogue remnants still clinging to a losing battle. They reached the dropship just as a massive explosion ripped through the base. The pilot wasted no time, lifting off as the ground beneath them disintegrated into a fiery chasm. Aaron collapsed into a seat, his chest heaving. Across from him, Valithia sat silently, her glowing eyes reflecting the fiery destruction below. "It's over," Aaron said, his voice heavy with exhaustion. Valithia looked at him, her expression unreadable. "For now." The dropship ascended into the safety of space, the team battered but victorious. As the Erebus came into view, Aaron allowed himself a moment of relief. But deep down he knew this was only the beginning of a much larger fight, for Valithia, for humanity, and for the fragile alliance that had been forged in the fires of war. The Erebus drifted silently through the void, its engines humming faintly as it made its way back to the safety of Allied space. The sky outside was a deep, endless black, punctuated by the soft twinkle of distant stars. Below them, the wreckage of the rogue faction's base slowly turned to ash, consumed by the collapsing energy that had once threatened to tear apart the planet. Inside the ship, a tense silence had settled over the crew. Though the immediate threat had been neutralized, the cost of the battle had left its mark on all of them. The heavy scent of scorched metal still lingered in the air, and the occasional hiss of a damaged circuit was the only sound in the corridors. Aaron sat in his quarters, staring out the small viewport, his mind far away from the battle they had just fought. The enormity of what had just transpired was settling over him like a weight he couldn't shake. They had won, yes. But the rogue faction had been a symptom of a much larger problem, one that wasn't going away anytime soon. A soft knock on the door broke his reverie. "Come in," he called. The door slid open and Valithia entered. She was no longer the warrior who had fought at his side on Thrain. The crystalline light in her body was dimmer, more subdued. Her movements were slow, as if the weight of everything she'd been through was finally catching up to her. She paused at the doorway, her violet eyes meeting his. "Captain." Aaron nodded, motioning for her to sit. "What's on your mind, Valithia?" She stepped forward, her gaze lingering on the stars outside for a moment before she met his eyes again. "I wanted to thank you, for everything. For believing in me when I didn't believe in myself." Aaron leaned back in his chair, his eyes softening. "You saved my life, Valithia. More than once. I think we're even." Her lips curved into a faint smile, but it quickly faded. "The war isn't over, Captain. There are still factions out there that want to tear apart what we've built." "I know," Aaron replied. "But we've taken a step in the right direction. The rogue faction might have been the most dangerous, but they're not the only threat we'll face. And we'll deal with them just like we dealt with this one." Valithia sat across from him, her glowing form flickering faintly in the dim room. "Do you ever wonder if we're just running from the inevitable? Every time we take down one faction, another rises in its place. It's as though this war will never end." Aaron's gaze drifted to the stars again. "Sometimes it feels that way. But I don't think the goal is to end it all in one stroke. Maybe it's about carving out enough space for peace to take root." She nodded slowly. "It's a hard fight to win." "It always is," he said with a wry smile. "But it's worth it." They sat in silence for a moment, the hum of the ship filling the quiet space between them. Valithia seemed lost in thought, her gaze distant. "Captain," she said, breaking the stillness, "I need to ask you something." Aaron raised an eyebrow. "Go ahead." She hesitated, her gaze flickering to the floor. "You know about my past, the things I did when I was with the rogue faction. The people I hurt. The choices I made. I can't undo them and I can't forget them. Do you think I can still be part of this new world we're trying to build?" Aaron's heart clenched at the vulnerability in her voice. He had seen it in her eyes before, the self-doubt, the regret. But he also saw something else, a strength, an unshakable resolve to atone for her past. You can, he said quietly. We all have pasts we can't change. But that doesn't mean we can't fight for something better. You've already done that, Valithia. You've chosen the right side and you've proven your loyalty. She looked up at him, her eyes searching. But what if they never forgive me? What if they always see me as the traitor? I don't think they'll see you that way, Aaron said firmly. The people we're fighting for, they're not the kind who hold grudges. They want a future. They want to build something that lasts. And that future needs people like you. People who've learned from their mistakes. Valithia's shoulders relaxed, and for the first time in what felt like ages, a genuine smile tugged at the corners of her lips. Thank you, Captain. Aaron gave her a nod, the bond between them solidifying further. You don't have to thank me. I believe in you. Later that day, as the Erebus entered the orbit of an Allied station, the crew gathered on the observation deck to discuss their next move. The situation was far from settled, but they had earned a moment of respite. The stars outside seemed to shimmer with possibility, as if offering a glimmer of hope amidst the darkness. Aaron stood before his crew, the familiar weight of leadership settling back into his shoulders. The battle for Thrain had been won, but there were still many battles ahead. Yet for the first time in a long while, he allowed himself to feel a flicker of optimism. Elena, he said, turning to his first officer, what's our status? She glanced up from her console, her brow furrowed. We've received reports from several of the Allied planets. The rogue faction's collapse is sending ripples through their networks. Some systems are experiencing destabilization, but the threat of a unified attack is weakening. The forces they left behind are scattered. That's good news, Aaron said. What about reinforcements? We've already contacted several fleets, Elena replied. They'll be arriving soon to bolster our position and provide aid to the hardest-hit colonies. Good, Aaron said, nodding. We need to make sure the people we're protecting know we're not abandoning them. He paused, scanning the faces of his crew. We've been through a lot together and this is just the beginning. But I believe we can see this through. For all the people who are counting on us. Valithia stood to his side, her presence a silent testament to the sacrifices they had made. She had become more than just an ally, she was a symbol of the possibility for redemption, for change, and for the future they were all fighting for. I agree, she said, her voice steady. We've taken a step forward today. But tomorrow we'll take another. The room fell silent for a moment, the weight of those words hanging in the air. Then Aaron spoke again, his voice resolute. Tomorrow we fight for that future. Let's get ready. We've got a lot of work ahead of us. As the crew began to disperse, preparing for the challenges that lay ahead, Aaron turned back to the viewport, gazing out at the stars once more. The road ahead was uncertain, but he knew one thing for sure, they weren't fighting alone. And for the first time in a long while, Aaron Hale felt that maybe, just maybe, they had a real chance at victory. A chance at something greater. Something worth fighting for. The war wasn't over, but a new dawn was beginning. The corridors of the Erebus were quieter now, the initial excitement and chaos of their victory fading into the calm hum of the ship's systems. Yet, beneath that calm, an undercurrent of tension remained. It was a tension that came not just from the war they had fought and the battles still ahead, but from something deeper, a growing awareness that the forces arrayed against them were not going to go away quietly. Aaron sat alone in the command center, his fingers resting lightly on the console before him. The ship's mission parameters blinked softly on the screen, a stark contrast to the turmoil that raged in his mind. The victory on Thrain had been significant, but it was only a single victory in what felt like an endless war. The rogue faction had been a powerful opponent, but there were whispers of other factions, other players in the shadows ready to take their place. The victory was fragile. The sound of soft footsteps broke his reverie. He didn't need to look up to know who it was. Valithia's voice was quiet as she spoke, her presence almost ethereal. Captain. Aaron turned, offering a faint smile. Valithia. What's on your mind? She stepped forward, her violet eyes focused on him, a quiet strength in them that hadn't been there before. I've been thinking about the future. About us. About everything we've sacrificed to get here. Aaron leaned back in his chair, regarding her with a mixture of concern and curiosity. Go on. I've done a lot of thinking, she said slowly, her voice a soft melody amidst the silence of the command center. And I keep wondering if all of this will ever be enough. We've fought so hard for freedom, for survival, but I don't know what kind of future we're building. I don't know if it'll be enough to last. Aaron studied her, sensing the quiet doubt that lingered in her words. This wasn't just about the war anymore. This was about something deeper, something more personal, her own place in this world they were fighting to create. She had been a leader in the rogue faction, a soldier in a war that had taken so much from her. Her past weighed heavily on her, and it had become clear to Aaron that her struggle wasn't just with the external enemy, it was with herself. You're not alone in that thought, he said, his voice steady but filled with empathy. None of us really know what the future holds, Valithia. That's the risk we take when we fight for something better. But I do know one thing. We can't let the uncertainty stop us from moving forward. Valithia's eyes softened, her shoulders relaxing just slightly. You always know what to say, don't you? Aaron chuckled, though the sound was more wistful than anything. Not always. But I do know this, you've proven yourself. Time and time again. To the crew. To me. And most importantly, to yourself. She looked away, her eyes searching the distant stars outside the viewport. I'm still trying to believe that, she whispered, almost as though she was talking to herself. Aaron stood up and walked over to her, placing a hand on her shoulder. It was an unspoken gesture of reassurance, a silent acknowledgement of the burden she carried. I get it. I really do. It's not easy, and I'm sure it won't get easier as we move forward. But we've already built something here, something worth fighting for. We can't let the shadows of our past define us. We define the future. For a long moment, Valithia said nothing. Then finally she nodded. I hope you're right. The next morning, the Erebus docked at a neutral station in the midst of the war zone. A small, nondescript station that had become a hub for the various factions in the region. It was here Aaron knew that they would meet with their allies. The war was no longer just about pushing back the rogue faction. It was about solidifying alliances and ensuring the unity of the remaining factions. But the atmosphere on the station was tense. The air was thick with uncertainty, with each faction eyeing the others warily, as though waiting for a reason to break into conflict. The faces of the men and women Aaron saw as they boarded the transport to the station were hardened by the same battles they'd fought. The war had taken its toll on them just as it had on Valithia. Aaron walked alongside Elena, keeping his mind sharp as they approached the conference room. He knew this meeting would be critical, far more so than any battle they had fought so far. The fate of their fragile coalition rested on their ability to maintain control in the face of growing tension. If even one faction decided to break away, the entire alliance could collapse, and with it, their chances for peace. As they entered the conference room, the leaders of the remaining factions were already gathered. Most of them were human, but there were representatives from various alien species, their forms varied and strange, each exuding a quiet power of their own. They all greeted Aaron with a mixture of respect and suspicion. There was no mistaking it, trust was something they still hadn't fully earned. Aaron took his seat at the head of the table, glancing briefly at Valithia, who had positioned herself across from him. He could see the weight of the moment in her eyes, the burden of representing not just humanity, but the future of their alliance. The murmurs around the table died down as the representative from the Zernian species, their largest and most powerful ally, stood up. Her form was elegant and graceful, her silvery skin shimmering in the dim light of the room. But there was a coldness to her demeanor that matched the strength of her people. We are here to discuss the future, she said, her voice calm but edged with authority. Not just of this war but of the fragile peace we hope to build. The rogue faction's fall is a victory, yes. But we cannot ignore the fact that other forces are already rising to take their place. If we are to survive this war, we need to decide what kind of future we want to fight for. Aaron leaned forward, his voice steady but commanding. We fight for one where the people of every species, human or alien, have the chance to live in peace. A future where we stop fighting each other and focus on building something better, something lasting. A low murmur spread around the room, but it was Valithia who spoke next, her voice steady and clear. The war will not end until we break the cycle. Until we show the galaxy that our differences do not make us enemies. The Zernian leader's gaze flicked to her, but it was not judgmental. It was calculating, as if weighing Valithia's words against the risk of failure. And what will we do, the Zernian asked, when the next rogue faction rises? When they come for us again? Aaron's gaze remained unwavering. We stand together. We defend each other. We will not let history repeat itself. Not on our watch. There was a long silence, the weight of his words hanging in the air. Slowly, one by one, the leaders nodded. The decision had not been easy, but it was clear to everyone in that room that they had no other choice. The path forward was uncertain, but they were committed to it, together. As the meeting concluded and the leaders began to disperse, Aaron stood, looking at Valithia once more. There was still doubt in her eyes but something else too, a spark of hope. "You did well," Aaron said quietly. Valithia nodded, her expression unreadable. "I only said what needed to be said." He gave her a small smile, then turned to leave the room, feeling a strange sense of peace. The road ahead was long and fraught with danger, but for the first time, there was something tangible in the air, a sense that they were not alone in this fight. That maybe, just maybe, they were building something that could survive. The war was far from over, but the dawn of a new alliance had begun. The Erebus drifted silently in the vast expanse of space, its hull carrying the weight of an uncertain future. The ship was a symbol of both their survival and the fragile hope they clung to. But despite the victories they had achieved and the alliances they had forged, Aaron knew the war was far from over. The galaxy was still teeming with threats, and new ones were already beginning to emerge. The discussions in the conference room had only confirmed what he already suspected. This war would be long and brutal. Despite the heavy air of tension that surrounded them, there was a strange stillness in the crew. The immediate battles were behind them, and the larger conflict stretched out before them like a distant storm. Aaron had spent countless hours in the command center, reviewing battle reports and coordinating with their new allies, but no matter how many plans he made, he couldn't shake the sense of impending danger that loomed over them. The universe was a big place, and as much as they had fought for survival, they knew their enemies had done the same. But it wasn't just the external forces that weighed heavily on him. There was something within the crew, a shift, a subtle change, that he couldn't quite put his finger on. The camaraderie that had once felt so natural now seemed fragile, as though the cracks of doubt were beginning to show. The unspoken fears of the war were settling into their hearts, and though they still fought together, there was a growing sense of isolation, even among those who had once stood side by side. Aaron leaned back in his chair, rubbing his temple as he stared at the star maps on the screen before him. The alliances they had formed were still holding strong, but each faction had its own agenda, its own hidden motives. And though they had agreed to fight together, Aaron couldn't shake the nagging thought that not everyone at the table had truly embraced the idea of a unified future. The thought was troubling, but it was one that he couldn't ignore. "Captain Hale," Elena's voice broke through his thoughts. She stood at the entrance to the command center, her posture tense but composed. "We've received a transmission from the Ilithian fleet. They're requesting a meeting." Aaron straightened, his mind shifting gears immediately. The Ilithians were one of the more reclusive and secretive factions they had allied with, and any request for a meeting always meant something important, perhaps something troubling. "Set up the meeting," Aaron ordered, pushing himself up from his chair. He met Elena's gaze. "We'll see what they want." The meeting with the Ilithian representatives was set in the observation deck, the room bathed in the soft light of distant stars. The Ilithians were a race of beings unlike any other in the galaxy. Tall, their bodies wreathed in a translucent mist that shimmered like liquid silver. Their voices were smooth and melodic, almost hypnotic in their cadence. The leader of their delegation, a woman named Kalia, stood at the center of the room, her eyes glowing faintly in the dim light. "Captain Hale," Kalia began, her voice carrying an air of quiet authority. "We come with urgent news." Aaron took his seat, nodding for her to continue. The last time they had spoken, their alliance had seemed rock solid, but there was an unmistakable tension in the air now. He could sense that something was about to shift. "What kind of news?" Aaron asked, his voice steady. "There is a new player in the galaxy," Kalia said. "One we've only recently discovered. A faction, an alliance of mercenaries, rogue factions and unknown forces, has begun to consolidate its power in the Outer Rim. We believe they are preparing for war." Aaron's eyes narrowed. The Outer Rim had long been a lawless region, filled with pirates, smugglers and countless factions vying for control. But if a new unified force was rising from that chaos, it could spell disaster for the already fragile peace they were trying to build. "Are they targeting us?" Aaron asked. Kalia shook her head, but her expression remained grim. "Not directly. But we believe their ultimate goal is to destabilize the alliances we've worked so hard to create. They seek to exploit the fractures between our factions and turn us against each other. They understand that if they can weaken us from within, the war will be theirs to win." Aaron exhaled slowly, processing the information. "What do we know about them?" Kalia hesitated, as though reluctant to reveal too much. "They are a coalition of many races including humans. They're well-funded and well-organized. Their leader is a shadow figure, a person who is always one step ahead of us. We don't even know their true name." But they call themselves the Wraiths, and their influence is spreading rapidly. The Wraiths, Aaron repeated, the name sending a chill down his spine. He had heard rumors of such an organization, but he had never thought it was anything more than an urban myth. Now it seemed that myth was becoming reality. What do you need from us? Elena asked, her voice steady. We need your help to identify their movements, Kalia said. We cannot act alone. Our resources are limited, and the Wraiths are too dangerous to take on without full support. If they are allowed to gain momentum, they will undo everything we've worked for. Aaron exchanged a glance with Elena. The Ilithians weren't known for trusting easily, and the fact that they were requesting their help was both an honor and a sign of the gravity of the situation. We'll assist you, Aaron said firmly. But we need to know everything you have on them. If we're going to deal with this, we need a plan. Kalia nodded. We will provide you with all the intelligence we have, but I warn you, the Wraiths are elusive. They move in shadows, and their methods are unlike anything we've encountered. As the meeting ended and the Ilithian delegation left, Aaron found himself staring at the stars once more, the weight of the decision pressing down on him. The war was no longer just about fighting rogue factions. It was about preventing something far darker from taking root in the galaxy, something that could destroy everything they had built. Valithia approached him quietly, her footsteps light on the metal floor. She had been at the meeting, standing silently at his side, and now she could sense the weight of his thoughts. We'll have to move fast, Aaron said without turning to face her. The Wraiths are dangerous, and if they're as organized as Kalia says, we won't be able to defeat them unless we strike quickly. Valithia nodded, her violet eyes reflecting the starlight. And we'll need to trust our allies. The Wraiths will try to turn us against each other. We don't have a choice, Aaron replied, turning to face her now. We have to make sure that doesn't happen. If we don't, we could lose everything. A long silence hung between them, the weight of their responsibilities settling over them. The war had shifted once more, and this time the stakes were higher than ever before. Valithia stepped closer, her voice barely a whisper. Then we'll fight. Together. Aaron's gaze met hers, and for the first time in what felt like forever, he saw something more than doubt and fear in her eyes. There was resolve. There was hope. Together they would face the coming storm. And together they would fight the Wraiths. The Erebus hung silently in the void, far from the familiar territories they had once called home. The mission ahead was dangerous, a fragile hope of salvation for the galaxy hanging in the balance. The Wraiths, an unseen enigmatic threat, had begun to exert their influence, their shadowy grasp reaching into the heart of the alliances. Their leader remained a mystery, their tactics brutal, and their purpose chillingly clear: to destabilize every faction they could, and use that chaos to seize control of the galaxy. It was a force that needed to be confronted before it could crush everything they had fought for. Aaron stood in the command center of the Erebus, the crew working efficiently around him, preparing for the operation. They were about to make their first move against the Wraiths, to uncover their hidden base of operations and begin the dangerous work of dismantling their organization from within. But as Aaron looked around, he couldn't ignore the unease that gripped his heart. They were out of their depth. They had no idea what they were truly walking into. Captain, Elena's voice broke his thoughts. We've decrypted the Wraith signal. The transmission leads us to a remote station in the Outer Rim, uninhabited for decades according to the records. Aaron nodded, his hand tightening on the edge of the console. Is it a trap? There's no way to tell for certain, Elena replied, her voice tense. But the signal is recent. It's definitely active. They're trying to lure us in. We'll have to take that risk, Aaron said, his mind already racing through the possibilities. Prepare the crew. Get us moving. The Erebus cut through the void, its engines thrumming steadily as they made their way toward the remote station. As they approached the coordinates, the ship's sensors picked up an unsettling silence. No ships. No life signs. Nothing. Too quiet, Valithia muttered from beside Aaron, her voice low. It's like they're waiting for us. I know, Aaron said, his gaze fixed on the view screen. They've drawn us into their web and now they'll be watching our every move. Stay sharp. Elena's voice came through the comms. We've got visual on the station, Captain. It's a derelict structure, but it looks intact. No signs of immediate threats, but we can't rule out traps. Deploy the ground team, Aaron ordered. We're going in. Stay in contact and don't break formation. With a tense, synchronized motion, the crew prepared for the landing party. It consisted of Aaron, Valithia, Elena, and a handful of seasoned soldiers who had proven their worth in the heat of battle. They suited up, their faces grim but determined, and made their way to the transport shuttle that would take them down to the station. The shuttle descended through the atmosphere, its engines cutting through the empty silence of the alien planet. As they neared the station, the looming structure grew larger, its jagged edges a sharp contrast to the soft curvature of the surrounding landscape. The station had been abandoned for years, but now it seemed alive, pulsing with an energy that felt wrong. The shuttle touched down with a soft thud, and the crew disembarked, weapons ready, their every sense heightened. The air was stale, and the flickering lights overhead cast long shadows along the walls. It was a place that felt abandoned, but the faint hum of machinery hinted that someone, was still here. "Stay close," Aaron ordered, leading the way down the dark corridors. The team followed, their footsteps echoing off the metal floor. The tension was palpable, each creak of the station amplifying the sense of dread that weighed heavily on them. They reached the control room, its large doors open, waiting for them. Inside, the room was cold, but it hummed with activity. Screens flickered with static, the panels covered in unfamiliar symbols. But what caught their attention immediately was the figure standing at the center of the room. A cloaked figure, their back turned, watching the monitors. There was something unsettling about their presence, an aura of power that seemed to fill the room. "Who are you?" Aaron called, his voice commanding but cautious. The figure didn't move at first, then slowly they turned to face him. Beneath the hood, two glowing eyes met Aaron's, a piercing gaze that seemed to look straight into his soul. It was the first time he had seen a member of the Wraiths in person, and everything about the figure radiated menace. "I am the Wraith," the figure said, their voice smooth, almost soothing. But there was a coldness to it that sent a shiver down Aaron's spine. "I am the one who has watched your every move, who has seen your desperation and your mistakes." Aaron's hand instinctively went to the hilt of his weapon. "What do you want?" The Wraith's lips curled into a smile, though it didn't reach their eyes. "What I want is simple. I want your alliance to crumble. I want your fragile unity to fall apart, piece by piece. And once you are divided, once you have turned on each other, I will rule." Valithia stepped forward, her voice firm. "You won't win. We will stop you." The Wraith tilted their head as if amused by the challenge. "You think you can stop me? You think your petty resistance will matter when the galaxy is suffocating in chaos?" Before Aaron could respond, a sharp crackle came through the comms, followed by Elena's urgent voice. "Captain, the station's security systems are online. We're not alone. It's a trap." The lights above flickered violently, and a hiss of air filled the room. A loud grinding sound echoed through the hallways as metal doors slammed shut, sealing the team inside. The Wraith didn't flinch, didn't even seem to acknowledge the change in the atmosphere. Instead, they stepped back, their voice now low and venomous. "You're already too late," the Wraith said. "I've set the wheels in motion. There is no escape. Your fate was sealed the moment you stepped into my web." Aaron's mind raced. They had walked right into a trap, but they had to act fast. There was no time for hesitation. The crew needed to fight their way out. "Get ready," Aaron shouted. He drew his weapon, adrenaline surging through him as the first wave of attackers, armed and clad in the same shadowy garb as the Wraith, stormed into the room. They moved like phantoms, swift and deadly, their weapons drawn. Valithia and the rest of the team opened fire, the sound of gunfire deafening as they pushed back against the onslaught. But even as they fought, Aaron couldn't shake the feeling that this was just the beginning. The Wraiths had anticipated every move, every strategy. As the battle raged around him, Aaron caught a glimpse of the Wraith, still standing in the shadows, watching. He had underestimated them. But now they would face the full force of their wrath. The war was far from over. And this fight, this battle for the future of the galaxy, was only just beginning. The end. Thanks for watching, everyone. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe for more exciting HFY stories. Your support means the world to us. And make sure to tap the bell icon so you never miss an update. Stay tuned for our next adventure, and until then, keep exploring the stars. See you in the next video.